Rad is the latest game from Double Fine, and marks their foray into the action roguelite genre. And while the game comes standard with Double Fine's level of creativity and style, it unfortunately misses it when it comes to the key aspects of a roguelite. But our story is that it is the far future, and humanity has survived not one, but two post-apocalyptic events. And we are stuck in the 80s in terms of fashion, catchphrases, and a whole lot of neon colors. But something has gone wrong, and it's up to us to venture out into the Forbidden Zone to save what remains of humanity. So the game itself, as you can see, is played in real time. You have a few basic attacks, and you'll also pick up items that can aid you. The levels themselves are procedurally built out of their specific biomes, with enemy types that can also be modified further. Now, the twist of Rad in terms of progression is what happens when that little experience bar at the top fills up. And when it gets to the top, you will mutate. And the mutation is essentially a new modifier / ability that will become activated going forward. The game has a handmade pool of mutations that it will draw from, and you'll have to basically adapt and change your playstyle on the fly based on which ones you get. You could get the ability to slow down time, shoot projectiles, fly, glide, you name it. The game also features micro mutations, which are passives, and these passives can come in the good variety or the side grade, where they'll give you something bad on top of something good. Now, when you run out of hearts, it is game over and you will be sent back to the start. The game features a persistent element in the form of collecting cassettes, which, again, keeping with the theme of it being the 80s, acts as your currency, which you can then buy and I believe use to unlock new content back at your home base. As you play through, you'll also gain kind of an account experience based on how far you play, and when that levels up, you will unlock a new item or piece of gear that will appear in subsequent runs. Again, very similar to the Biome Isaac on that regard. And like I said, the overall theme and design of Rad is great. I love the style. Well, you can't hear over my voice, but the game features, of course, the prerequisite amount of synth that I always enjoy. But the problem that I have with Rad comes down more on the moment-to-moment side, and how the game just never really felt right in my hands. And we're going to talk about that one next, but first, a quick shout out to our current Game Wisdom Patreon supporters and sponsors. And now for a quick thank you to our current Game Wisdom sponsors and Patreon supporters. And if you'd like to continue the discussion on game design, be sure to check out our Discord channel, linked down below. As I said, on paper, everything about Rad should work. But the problem I have with the game is that the general gameplay feels a lot more cumbersome and clunky than it really should be, especially in a game where when you lose your health, the entire run is over. And with only 3 hearts at the start, you're going to see how quickly that goes away. Now, when you're fighting most normal enemies, you are able to kind of stun them into your attack, or you're able to stun them and block them from performing attacks. However, the many elite and boss variant versions of enemies have no stuns, and it means that if you try to attack them normally, you're going to get hit before you can even react to get away from it. And the general form of play to really fight these enemies is to either use range, which becomes very slow in some cases, or immediately attack, and then just as the animation ends, go into a dodge, and you're able to dodge through enemy hitboxes. Now, at this point, I don't remember if the game gives you iframes during the dodge, but you pretty much have to be kept on the move when you're trying to fight these enemies. And while that doesn't sound like it's a horrible thing, it really reduces the combat down to only a few viable options, and this becomes harder and harder to do when you start fighting groups of enemies, especially if there are multiple elites in the same pack. And as the game goes on, you're going to be constantly being assaulted by these enemies, and I always felt like I wasn't really having the tools I needed to make the most out of it. Now, another thing that I ran into, and this is something that I want to ask everyone who's already played Rad, and that is, do you unlock melee modifiers or mutations? The only one I got was one that makes me hit like a little bit harder, or I think it gave me a little faster attack speed. But during my play of the game, we played this for just under 2 hours. We did not run into any melee or close range mutations, such as making our arm maybe extend out, or do anything along those lines. They all seemed either range focus, or kind of like a special power sort of ability. And when we looked at the logbook just before we ended the stream of the game, there are a ton more mutations that we did not even get a chance to see, and I don't know if those were locked to the progression model, as we said earlier, in terms of the experience. If that was the case, I think that was a bad idea, because it felt like the game was taking way too long to get interesting in terms of its procedural design. And keeping with that, the levels themselves once again fall into that very basic form of procedural generation. Very large areas where nothing really happens, you're just supposed to kind of go through the motions or keep going, followed by small specific points of interest that you have to do something at. The overall goal of each biome is to find statues and activate them that kind of act as the keys to the boss door, and then go through the boss door, fight the boss, and you move on. From what we were playing, with each biome being made up of different levels, you'll fight like a random elite pack, that's kind of the first fight, and then the guardian of that biome is a boss. And to the game's credit, there are variations of each boss that changes how they play. And ultimately, I think that's the kind of thing that we were talking about with Rad, that there are a lot of great elements to this game that I enjoyed, but at the end of the day, the moment-to-moment side of things just wasn't working for me. I was expecting more in terms of being able to fight enemies, the combat feeling a lot better in my hands, and of course the mutations mattering more. And again, that may improve after hours of play and unlocking all matter of progression and mutations, but the key point about this kind of genre is that it should feel good in your hands from the first moment. This is one of the reasons why everyone fell in love with Dead Cells or The Binding of Isaac. And unfortunately, there just wasn't enough to keep my interest or keep me wanting to play this game past our stream of it. I'm curious to see if Double Fine decides to add more updates to it or more content. Because again, this game has all the charm that Double Fine is known for, and if you're just looking for a very uniquely looking title, definitely give this one a check. But if you're somebody like me who has fell in love with Dead Cells, Binding of Isaac, Spelunky, for games that really felt great in your hands and tested and rewarded you for it, Rad unfortunately does not make that cut. But we shall see what they decide to do with it in the future. With that said, thank you so much for watching this video. Be sure to come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. Once again, this has been Rad, and I will catch you all later. Until then, take care. If you're looking for a book on design, my first title, 20 Essential Games to Study, is out now. It is available where most books are sold, and it comes in paper, hardcover, or digital copies. This is the perfect book for anyone interested in learning about game design, whether you are a student, enthusiast, or just a fan. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed things, be sure to do all the liking and subscribing that the kids are doing these days. Check out our Discord channel linked down below where we hang out and chat game design, and come back later tonight for our regular streamings. But that's it, and tune in for more great content here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games.